We all have our own path to walk. It may be obstructed, it may be winding, and no doubt it will have peaks and valleys, but it is ours alone. Like onlookers at a marathon, friends and family can offer encouragement along the way, but ultimately we decide the trajectory that we take. In this series, Juliet Doris Williams offers a clear view from her path that may inform your decisions as you move toward finding your faith. One part spirituality, one part real-world practicality, and a serious splash of fun. Here's Juliet.
Hello, welcome to Finding Faith. I'm the author of 2 books, one of which is Leaving Church, Finding Faith, 6 Steps for Discovering Your Purpose in the World After Leaving the Christian Church, and the primary focus of this podcast. You can find my works and me on my website at julietdoriswilliams.com. In this space, I talk about the book, but most times about what it means to be a practicing person of faith who is not connected to a church, or the church, as it is commonly referenced. I aim for this to be a safe space where we talk about being a Jesus follower while practicing being human. So a lot about life, a lot about faith, a lot about the interplay between the two that we navigate day by day. Thanks for joining me. Today we are having another of our Finding Faith conversations where we invite fellow humans on the journey of faith to chat with us about practicing faith, mostly on the outside of the traditional institution of church. Today's guest is Stanya Greathouse. Stanya is founder and CEO of Teen Start, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization in northern and central Ohio, whose mission is to enhance the social development of children, teens, and young adults, preparing them for adulthood through workforce development, food insecurity, and independent living housing for youth aging out of foster care. Stanya and I have a bit of a history, in addition to now being real life colleagues. But our history is that we went to seminary together. And so there's a story that we will talk about. So one of the conversations that stay in my mind about my relationship with Stanya, and we'll talk about that at some point today. So Stanya and I know each other, so that may come up in our conversation today. So welcome, Stanya, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you, I gave your 30-second elevator speech, but why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, as Juliet said, my name is Stanya Greathouse, and she and I have been knowing each other for quite a while. I am originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and have roots in the Columbus area as well. So I kind of travel to and fro. My journey of faith has been one that's very important to me, and I think it has really shaped who I am today. I have 2 beautiful children, both college graduates, living in all parts of the world, and just blessed to be in the position that I am today from whence I've come.
That is awesome. I gave the 30-second elevator speech, and this is quite fascinating to me. As I work, as you know, I work primarily with adults in the mental health, addiction, and trauma space. But your work has you founding a nonprofit organization to work with children, teens, and young adults. What drew you to that work?
Growing up in inner city Cleveland, just having a pulse on the things that were going on in my neighborhood, which really connected to my own personal experiences, and just seeing that the children and the youth, they really did not have a lot of guidance, and safety has always been my at the heart, at the root of the work that I've done, that I've started. And let me be clear, my childhood trauma really precipitated the program that I started, which began watching the children running around the library outside till wee hours of night. And I'm like, okay, well, they need something to do. And so in my young years, because we're 30 years in, I just began providing programmings in the libraries, sitting them down, and I began to hear stories that were similar to mine. And it really grabbed my heart. And I just felt that I needed to contribute to being a part of the solution. I had experienced the problem. Now it's like, what do you do? And so that's how Teen Start evolved, or began, I'm sorry, and it just evolved from there. Originally, my thought pattern was, these kids are already making decisions that adults make and not knowing really what they're doing. So as they're getting older, I believe the youngest was around 13, 14 at that time. But as they get older, they're going to have to make more decisions about their lives. And so my goal was always to prepare them for that process, for that part of their life. And let's be clear, I wasn't trying to be their parent. But I understood in my neighborhood, parents were doing the best they could with what they knew. And so the program kind of stemmed from there. And, I didn't have to market or recruit because the kids were really hungry for that type of engagement. So, and we, after years of doing the work, I, like most people in ministry, and I'll call it ministry, wanted to run for the border. And as I ran, it ran with me and followed me to seminary, Delaware, Ohio. And I slowed down my running and it kept coming. So then we began providing programming in Columbus. So just the need has been, and it continues to be so great. That I would take nothing from what I started, even though I never in my wildest dreams experienced it would be or thought it would be where it is today.
Now I know why we connect with each other and continue to connect with each other across our many travels. And you and I share similar, maybe not, our work has a lot of different intersections, but the journey to seminary initially started with trauma, and the work that I was doing in answer and in response to my trauma, and discovering that the journey to healing that I embraced for myself, I also was inspired, drawn to be part of the solution for others who were experiencing the same traumas that I was also in many ways still in recovery from. And that led to one thing, which led to another thing, which led to another thing. And church back in that day was a very important part of my recovery journey. God and church played a very heavy role in my ongoing healing. I'll say that. And ultimately it led to seminary, because you talk about the running part. So we're going to veer off a little bit and talk about that running part. I called it ignoring the persistent knock on the back of my brain that we call that in seminary jargon and church jargon, a call.
Absolutely.
We call it a call.
Absolutely.
And surrendering to that call is absolutely about stopping the running, right?
Yep.
Stopping
Yep.
the running. And it's like, okay. And just, it's just saying, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Just surrender,
stop.
just
Mhm.
stop and just surrendering to, okay, what? Surrendering to the what? Not
To the
from
one.
to the what, and to the who, depending on where your faith lands you. And for me, it was a who. It was a presence. It was the church was um, a place where I found nurture, and a place where absolutely I found healing. And there were and this was through some beautiful, impactful human beings that were placed in my path, which continued to lead for me to wanting to know more about this thing, this faith, this what is this all about? This thing we call Christianity, and how did it get to be here? And so that's kind of how my brain works, wanting to get to wanting to understand the why of things,
Yeah.
and which ultimately, once I stopped running, led me to seminary.
That is quite interesting. And for me, definitely church played a huge role. Um, but it wasn't the people. It was the presence.
The presence, the spirit.
I come from a very different background, let's say that.
Okay, say more. Say more.
Even in my religious foundation, I was raised in as a Muslim, an American Muslim Nation of Islam,
Wow.
and so
That's new information. Thank you for sharing. Say more.
Having that background, and coming into the Christian faith was not an easy transition. And I'll tell you, I got there through a good friend. We were 13, and I wanted to spend a night over her house all the time. And so her mom's like, okay, but you going to church. Okay, we'll try this church thing. I was familiar because I had an aunt who she wasn't allowed to take me to church, but we knew she got up on Sunday morning and that's where she was headed, down the street. And so the first time that I can recall really feeling the presence of God is when I went to church with my girlfriend, and I ran. It was a Baptist church. I ran running. I ran out of the church, sat in the bus stop for an hour by my lonesome because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. It was different.
It was scary or just
Oh yeah.
unsettling?
It was
both of those
it
things.
was a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because I had never encountered anything, and really there was no one around me that could explain. Because I ran, remember, I was outside. I was on the curb by then, waiting on the bus to come. But my girlfriend did come and sit next to me. And she says, you okay? She's like, well, this is just church. It was normal for her, but it was not normal for me. And I don't think I went back for many years after that, until I got pregnant with my children. And that's when I began going a little bit more regularly.
So let's go back. Let's go back to the presence, because I think you and I shared this a brief conversation. I don't know how brief it was, but a conversation about the mystical. But both of us have had mystical experiences that cannot be described in any other way besides
Absolutely.
mystical. So can you articulate what that presence, beyond being scary and unsettling, clearly overwhelming for a 13-year-old.
It was overwhelming. Yeah, most
Can you say more about, in terms of describing that now in a retrospective way, of course, because you've got, looking at it now with adult eyes.
with a different lens. And this is the
Yeah.
first time I ever told the story, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you for trusting
in its
us with that.
entirety. It's
Yes,
like,
thank you.
So I'm being put in remembrance of my own story, which is a beautiful thing as I move forward. I would say, as I sat there and, people were shouting and they're praying, and then I just felt this warmth come over me. It was a warm feeling, but it wouldn't stop. It was just a warmth. I can, even sitting here, I know exactly what I was wearing the whole time. It was just a warmth. And then it got increasingly intense. And that's the part that overwhelmed me, because I'm wanting to physically shake, but it would not leave. And I can call it a presence now just because of my journey and understanding, but it would not go away. And I began crying, of course, but it wasn't a bad cry. I didn't feel like I was being hurt. I felt the touch. It was a touch.
And it stayed with you.
And it
obviously stays.
Yeah.
Lingering. Yeah.
It lingered for a while. And I was transformed that day, because my life was never the same after that.
And so you ran. That was your first leg of running. And somehow you ended up in the Nation of Islam, right?
No, we were born. I was born. You were
born there, and so that was before. Okay,
absolutely. Okay. So that was way before. So we went to Muslim school.
Sure.
And so I started school at the age of 3. And so we went to the school. So my dad, we were very much ingrained in that faith tradition. But as my mom and dad separated, then there was really no religious expectations or practices going on at that time.
Until that now infamous day. And so when did you circle back? I mean, how many years was it between that fateful day and
wow.
When did you circle back to, not to Islam, but to, because I mean, you ended up, and I guess this is a good time to share with the listeners how that one conversation that you and I, and what's that been? How many years ago has that been? I don't remember. I graduated in 2009. So
2009 we graduated.
It's been some years. But the one conversation that I told you about that stuck with me, because I was on my reasons for landing in seminary had to do with meeting the qualifications for ordination in the United Methodist Church. And so that was why I was there, not necessarily to pursue a degree, but I needed certain studies under my belt to continue my journey toward ordination. And you and I had, and I don't even remember what led up to that conversation, but you and I had this conversation about how people, and I had shared that I was on the ordination path, and you said that people were trying to put you on the ordination track, and you weren't having it. at all.
having it.
You weren't having it. And so, and you were quite annoyed. I remember that, just quite annoyed with people trying to put you on the ordination path. And you're like, no. And even then I was thinking in my head, good on you for being grounded enough in what your own, yes, you in your own call to resist that kind of pressure, because that's some pressure.
It is
coming from people who may be supporting you in many ways. That's some pressure from people that you possibly look up to, people that you're working with in your own faith journey and the work that you are called to. That's quite astute of
it
you
is.
to understand that. Yeah, I'm not having it. That's all about you and not about me. So
and I won't say that I knew I was being astute. I think I was being stubborn.
Well, whatever word we call it.
It goes along with that running thing, right? But something in me though was very clear that was not my path, and I don't know why. It's like, nope, that's not it.
That's not it. And you took steps to make sure.
I sure did.
And so say more about that.
I did. I was actually, when I first started seminary, I was pursuing a master's of divinity and a dual degree and a master's in counseling. And the pressure got so that I said, I know how to remedy this. Let's just stop this divinity crap and get an education. And now I don't meet the qualifications.
There you go.
So, and there was a backing away.
Okay. So they backed off after that.
Absolutely. But I always knew the deacon track worked better for me.
Same.
Because I am a community driven, focused person. That's where the community raised me in such a way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And so my goal has always been, how do I give back to the community? Because I see the lack and the need. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I've always had a thing, even after starting going to church regularly. I could not understand why the people in the community weren't in the churches. It was people coming from outside of the community.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Whether they grew up, some of them grew up in it, and then they just continued to come even when they moved out of the community. But rarely did I see in the churches that I was a part of the actual people in the church. So there was a direct disconnect for me. And I soon began to understand the why, which again left a taste in my mouth that I don't want to be a part of that.
And the why being what?
People being made to feel less than and not comfortable because they didn't fit.
Right.
And that was my journey, my life journey. I never fit, so I didn't really care, but to see how it affected other people.
Right.
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 That troubled me a lot. And it still does to this day. So when I see a church that's really functioning and connected to the community, I'm like, that's it. They're far and few, but I'm like, that's it right there. I don't have a problem with people coming back and visiting, but don't put the wall up to where the people that are right there in that community can't participate or don't feel comfortable enough to participate.
That's, yeah, Yeah. And now, I now understand why our paths seem so similar. Um, because I was on the path to ordination as a deacon, but I saw my work out in community and, um, and absolutely the same, because the work of transformation, Spirit does that. Church in and of itself doesn't do that, but Spirit does that. And whereas I talk a lot in this space about the way of Jesus, the model of Jesus, and Jesus, I mean, he could have set himself up in the synagogue of his day, but he didn't do that. He went to the people and did his work outside with the people. And then, and they found him outside, not in the synagogue. They found him outside. And so all of the work and the miracles and all of that wondrous stuff, all that love that he expressed out in his earthly ministry happened on the outside.
On the outside.
With the so-called quote unquote outsiders.
Outsiders, the unclean.
The unclean,
The people that,
the so-called unclean, right?
Yeah, the so-called, absolutely.
With the powerless, the marginalized. I mean, the women that they don't talk much about in I'm talking about church writ large now.
Absolutely.
About the ministry of the women.
Absolutely.
That supported and followed.
What's interesting is you asked the question earlier about going back to church. I've been through many denominations.
Well, and
I went through them all.
Okay. And we could make a list, because I got a few too. So tell me about yours. Yes. Tell me about yours.
Like I've seen Baptist, United
same.
Methodist.
Yep.
Pentecostal, Apostolic, Church of God in Christ, Church of God. I've been through them all.
I didn't do that one. I haven't done that one.
I've even been through an African, non-denominational. So, I think a lot of that was my seeking.
Yes.
For that connectedness, that I could not really find. But through it, I continued to grow.
Yes.
What the scripture talks about, when after Jesus was 13, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a period of time that nobody had heard, or there's no information, but it said he grew.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. We grow.
We grow. We're growing despite wherever we are.
Even though it's I call those pit stops.
Absolutely.
So even though this was not the place where you land, or you might land there temporarily, even though it didn't feel like you were landing there temporarily when you landed. But ultimately, it was a temporary pit stop on the road, on the way.
And this is not a bash on the church.
No.
Because the church is where I found Jesus, right?
Yeah. Same.
However, this conversation for me is, and it's not being had a lot. It's being open to where he's at. Yeah, I found him there, but he's everywhere. God is, if you believe, he's everywhere.
Everywhere.
He's not just in this denomination, not in that building, not that. He's everywhere.
Everywhere.
And you have to be able to discern your where.
Yes.
And your season for the where. I had a season where I was church. My kids know we was 3 days a week. We're going. Thank God I made it through that season, because had I gotten them to the teen years and tried that, I don't know if it would have. I don't know if it would have worked. But God knows,
Yeah.
right? He knows where we come from. He knows what we need at specific times in our lives.
Yes.
And he knows where he has need of us.
Mm. And we'll maneuver around over and under our plans to
Absolutely.
make sure that we land in the place that we are supposed to be.
I don't care how much you run, little girl.
Truth. Hashtag truth. Hashtag truth. You always end up where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be for a season, as you said. But we always land where we're supposed to be. And we have the experiences that support us on that journey so that when we get to the place
Absolutely
where we're supposed to be, we are well equipped.
Absolutely.
Well equipped to do the thing that we're ultimately called to anyway, which is where your work interfaces with your faith.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely,
because you were called to that at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. At the beginning, yeah. Just the things and the people that I have had to minister to on that journey. It constantly affirmed that I was where I needed to be, where I was supposed to be. And ironically, people that have been hurt by the church.
Yeah.
People that had terrible things happen to them in that space, and through people that were supposed to be godly, right? So it's like, where do they go? Where do those individuals go, or who do they get to connect to when those that are in that structure, the building that's supposed to be a safe space?
Right.
Where do they go when they're being hurt by that particular, right? It leaves little room for you wanting to go and find another one, and you keep running into the same thing. So I think that just further validates that God is everywhere, and he has a place for those individuals as well.
For
so
everyone.
That they can get, absolutely, so that they can get what they need from the divine.
Yes.
So now we're not talking about people. And I think that's where we sometimes get off course. And that was what I was taught by God's presence from the beginning. I was seeking his presence, and he didn't leave room for me to misconstrue that it was coming from people. Does that make sense? I may not be using the proper term, but
I don't know that we have language for this, Stanya.
There was no doubt in my mind that despite all these people that are around not necessarily being nice to me, I couldn't afford to care because I needed healing.
Right.
And so I had to just go and be in God's presence, because that is what he gave me from day one. It was his presence that overwhelmed me. But then afterwards, I began to feel human. I began to feel loved. It was through the presence of God.
And good on you. It took me a few revolutions through some people and some denominations and through some processes maybe, to get to what you're just now talking about, that being that presence that I knew was there. No one taught me that. I knew that because I'd had a couple of what I started off with mystical encounters. One at my kitchen sink while I was washing dishes, and we won't go into that right now. I think I mentioned that in my book, a little commercial there. But when you know, and when you have felt that presence, then nothing else comes even close to that. Especially when you are a seeker.
Absolutely.
Because
I think that's it.
Ultimately, that becomes the ground. That becomes the ground, and everything else is just, I don't know, fodder.
Yeah. It has it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like so you. One thing that I didn't mention in your introduction is about you now have a doctorate in divinity.
Yes.
So what led you to that, and how does that interface with your work, or your faith, or both?
So after while in graduate school and fighting the powers that be, that says that wanted to determine my value in the spiritual religious traditions. I personally, and I honestly not walking or utilizing that title, right?
Right.
I just felt led to continue to maximize what I believe God had put in me. For no other reason but to validate some of the work that I do, right? God already validated me because He gave me the wisdom and the strength to overcome so many obstacles in my life. However, man wants to see these letters, these words,
the alphabet,
the alphabet, all
behind your name.
How many letters of the alphabet do you have, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was more so my reasoning for moving in that direction. I don't think I've fully utilized it as of yet. I think just even sitting here with you, Juliet, is like a first step. Like me sitting in that bus stop. I'm in the bus stop.
You're
again.
In the bus stop.
I am in the bus stop.
I hope this is not overwhelming, though.
No,
so
I think I'm ready. I think you
Okay.
prepared me for this day.
Okay, good.
I don't feel overwhelmed because I know what the presence is now. Right?
That's right.
I didn't know then. So now I know what the presence is. Now I have to have the faith to move in the grace of God.
Yeah.
And I'm not knowing where this is taking me, but okay, Lord, it's all you. I'm here. I'm at the bus stop now. I'm not running anymore. I'm tired. My legs hurt. I'm at the bus stop, chilling, waiting on you.
Chilling, waiting on my ride. Waiting on my ride.
They Ubering now, but I'll still get on the bus if that's where was that what you got for me, right?
You know what? The bus is where the people are.
Absolutely.
The bus is where the people are. And so
that is so hilarious because I used to love to run the bus. I did. I'd ride all over the town and wherever I needed to go. But
Well,
yeah,
well,
I am.
since you are at the bus stop on this intersection, I'm
Yeah.
going to say, Dr. Stanya, what is one or more things you want the world to know about you?
Hmm. I would just like the world to know that I am a legacy builder.
Hmm.
The title deacon often is synonymous with a bridge, right? I see legacy in that bridge in the same light. God did not bring me this distance, heal me, um, for it to end with me.
Mm.
And so at this stage of my life, whatever I can do to pass the baton to the next generation so that their journey can be built, have a foundation to build upon. That's my current mission. And I think it was always my mission, but I shudder when I see things shut down because the founder or the leader no longer is there or no longer wants to do it. And I think we oftentimes, especially within our culture, do a disservice. Um, if God bless this thing, whatever this thing is,
Right.
then surely it should not stop with you or me.
That's right. A legacy.
A
A
legacy.
legacy. That's something
So
else you and I share. So
yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
I've told my children and my nephews and nieces that I'm gonna leave a legacy of love. No more trauma, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It stops here.
It stops here.
Yeah.
Generational trauma stops here.
Here. Yeah.
It ends with me.
It ends with me. Oh my. Now I know why we
Mhm.
keep running into each other. I absolutely know why. And I am grateful. I'm
Mm.
grateful that we, continue to cross paths in our, uh, different, different streets. But on that same destination of bridging our love of people, our mission to assure that the trauma stops here,
Yes.
and being the bridge to God's heart. Oh, that's
Yes.
the deacon journey. That's the
Yes.
deacon journey. And so, and it's our lives have no meaning if
Mm.
we do not give away the
Yes.
lessons
Yes.
and give away the lessons that we have learned and
Mm-hmm.
spread the love that we have been
Mm-hmm.
given, and the gifts that we have been given.
And the
So,
gifts.
so thank you, Dr. Stanya,
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
sharing your story, sharing your self, sharing your love and your life and your healing, one with the people that you serve, and for us, the listeners, that you have graced us with all of that. So I am so appreciative. Thank you for agreeing to come.
Thank you. I told someone, I said, I don't think me and Juliet ever talked. We didn't talk 5 or 6 times while we were in school, right?
No, no. But I remember that we talked, yeah,
But we,
if that, a
if
handful.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so,
But we both left an impression on one another. And
yes, we
so
did.
I am so grateful to you for this opportunity. I do have my own shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Go ahead.
We are Team Start. We're embarking on our healing farms. right?
Healing
So
farms.
we're doing some urban farming, and so we're developing some healing farms throughout the cities, and to give youth a space, a safe space to be.
And so how can people find you in Teen Start?
They can find me online, www.teenstartinc.org. Simple email, teenstartinc@gmail.com. 614-902-5895.
Thank you.
You can tell I've never did this before, so I'm like, oh, okay.
But it will not be the last time, and I hope that you will come back. Because I think we could have a lot more to talk about. So thank you so much, Dr. Stanya. And that's all we have for you today now, listeners. But we do appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Finding Faith.